In this video, I want to talk about cached images from Safari on iOS devices. I think that as examiners, we all know that images that are cached from a web browser make for problematic evidence because it's really hard to tie those back to a specific user action, and generally they don't come along with timestamping information. But if you've processed mobile devices, then you've no doubt seen lots of images from Safari's Cache.db, and you may have been surprised to see that those actually came along with a creation timestamp. So I've done a lot of testing on how Safari caches images, why it caches images, and also gone in to validate what our tools are telling us. And spoiler alert, this timestamp is not quite right. So I'm going to show you some of what I've learned and just give you more context for this artifact so that if you do use it as evidence, you'll know fully what it means that this image is there. So before I dive into the artifacts in question, I want to talk just very briefly about settings that would have to be in place for you to see these artifacts in an iOS extraction. My test device here is an iPad that my 12-year-old foolishly allowed me to jailbreak and use for my experiments today. But let's take a look at her settings real quick. So if you're in settings and you go under Siri and search, you will see Siri suggestions. So suggestions in search, suggestions in lookup, suggestions on lock screen. That's important. They are also under Safari settings. So if you scroll down and you go to Safari, you click on Siri and search, you'll also see them here. Siri and suggestions, allow on lock screen. And if you read under here, it says allow information from Safari to appear in search, lookup, keyboard, and lock screen. Siri may learn from and make suggestions based on how you use the app in this case being Safari. And again, these are the default settings, so if you don't opt out of it at the time that you set up the device, or you don't come in and disable it after the device is set up, then you will get these suggestions if you search in Safari. This is an older operating system because I had to be able to jailbreak this device, but checking earlier on 15.4.1, these are all still here. They're kind of split up a little bit differently, but generally you'll find them under Siri and search and under Safari. So now I'm going to do what any user would do. I'm going to open up Safari and I'm going to do a search. So as I start typing, I type who, and already we see Google is trying to suggest to me things that I might be searching for. This isn't what we're talking about today. But as I keep typing, I say who is and type the letter A. Already at the letter A, Siri within Safari is suggesting maybe you're looking for Amber Heard. She's in the news. A lot of people are searching for Amber Heard, and I get a picture and I get a description that's been pulled from Wikipedia. So I keep typing, and sure enough, who is Amber? But I meant who is Amber Tamblyn. Now, I type TA, and again, I get another picture. I get some more text under Siri Knowledge. And as I keep typing, even though I misspell her name, I still get a third image and more information from a different website about Amber Tamblyn. I finish my search, I get a results page, and that's that. Now, you may see screenshots of this page show up on Safari, and there's reasons for that. It's outside the scope of this video, but just remember those three pictures that Siri Knowledge suggested to me as I was typing. Now we get to the fun part where we get to start digging up artifacts of what our user did in Safari and what we would find in an extraction. Now, one of the things that I could have done is I could have used UFED and done a full file system extraction of this iPad and then looked through that extraction, but I am way too impatient for that. So what I do, since it's jailbroken, is just mount the file system. I use MacFuse to do that with SSHFS, and I can just open up Finder and start digging around in the iPad's file system. How I get that all set up is outside the scope of this video as well, but if anybody's interested in seeing how that's done, I would be happy to show everyone how to do that. It really speeds up finding artifacts and testing. One thing that you can do too is that you can actually SSH into a jailbroken device and then just grep the whole file system. So here is our file system, and I can search recursively for Amber Tam. I'm just going to put Tam because I don't remember how I misspelled it now. And hit enter and let that run. And when it's done, it's going to show me everywhere that that string shows up in the file system. And that's really helpful too for hunting down test cases that you've done on your device. So I'm going to open up Finder here, and here is my mounted iPad file system, and this should look familiar to everybody. This is what you would see in that file system tab in Physical Analyzer. So I'm going to go into mobile, and there are two things you're going to want to grab. So the first is in mobile, under containers, under application. First, you got to figure out which one of these application GUIDs is Safari, and I've cheated and already done that. I know it's this one. And so the thing I want to grab is in library and caches, and it's this com.apple.mobile Safari folder. And I'm just going to copy that out to my file system. Oh, I already did it earlier. So let's overwrite that, the latest one. You can open these up straight off the live file system. I'm not going to lie and say that I haven't done that, but I would strongly recommend against doing that, because if you modify things in the iOS file system or accidentally delete things, you could potentially brick your test device. So I would always copy those out to your local machine and examine them there. One thing you can do just in general as you're testing is something I do, and I just sort by the modified date, and I can just watch what gets modified on the file system as I'm doing real changes to the device in real time. Sometimes I'll just filter to plist and I'll just see what plist get changed, and that kind of gives me some clues as to where things in the file system are affected by different actions on the device. Or I'll filter to databases, and that is going to speed up testing and hunting down where you would find the answer to whatever your question is in the file system. Now I'm going to back out of here. Actually, I'm going to go back into mobile and go into library. And caches. And then I'm looking for this com.apple.parse cdaemon folder. And I'm going to grab these sessions. Now, some of these, if you're doing this live, some of them might say .open, or one of them should really say .open, and that means that you have a live open session in Safari right then at this moment. I did this earlier today, so my session in Safari is closed out, so they all say closed, but just be aware of that, that if you see one that says .open, that's the session that's currently happening on the device. So I'm going to grab these because I don't know which one I'm going to need yet, and I'm going to put these over here as well. And then once those are done copying, we'll start taking a look at some of these things. Let's take a look at these artifacts that we grabbed. But again, how did I know that these were the things that I should grab? Again, I start doing experiments on my test device and I watch those modification dates. I turn to grep and I search for strings that I included in my experiment. We grepped for Amber Tam, and now we can go in and see what we got. So the first thing that we see is that Amber Tam shows up in a blob file under our network cache records for Safari. One interesting thing that I see is this whole page tab history helper. And so I'm going to hypothesize that if I pulled this HTML out and looked at it, it would be a perfect representation of that results page that we saw. I could be wrong. Probably best to pipe these results into a text file so you can look at it in something a little easier to read than Bash, but this is a great way to start looking for clues of where you need to look to find answers to your questions. So let's go back over here, and I think the first thing we'll look at is Cache.db. So as you'll recall, in our screenshot here from Physical Analyzer, pulled out this image, saw it in the Images tab, and it gives Cache.db as the source file. Now this is from a totally different different extraction, not from our test device, but I know that Cache.db is where these things are located. So let's take a look at Cache.db from my test iPad. Now, I forgot to point something really important out. Make sure that when you're doing this, that you grab the shim and this wall file with any DB that you grab. When you're doing live testing, probably without fail, the edits that you're making in real time are going to be in the write-ahead log. And if you don't grab these, you're not going to see the changes that you made. With iOS, there's no telling when these would actually get committed to the master database. Sometimes it happens almost immediately, sometimes it happens overnight, sometimes it doesn't happen until the device is restarted. So just make sure you grab these two, and then when you open it up, those changes will come along. So Cache.db is essentially made up of a blob data table, a receiver data table, and a response data table. And all it's doing is that it's storing communications that it has with Apple's server. So I can see here the CDN where it's pulling these images. And these are actually not that ephemeral. When I opened up that 2020 extraction and went to these links on Apple CDN, they were all fully still active. So that's something interesting. We can see here in the file name already, Amber Heard, Amber Tamblyn. I don't see Amber Tamblyn in this one, but I'm going to guess it's probably that other one. And we see our timestamps. These correlate with this creation date that Physical Analyzer is giving us. But something really important here, when we look at the actual response from the server over here in our ASCII, we will see dates and it will say GMT. These timestamps are in UTC, and through testing I now know that even though when I opened up my extraction in Physical Analyzer I told it to adjust everything to Eastern Time, it did not adjust this. It doesn't tell me here that this is a UTC timestamp, but that is exactly what this is. So if you're going to reference this creation time in any of your evidence for a case, make sure that you manually adjust these, because it's just spitting it out exactly as it's stored in Cache.db, and it's not adjusting it, even if you tell it to adjust it when you load up your extraction. So here in the receiver data, let's take a look at these blobs. Now, we already know who this is, and we remember seeing this picture under the series suggestions. These blobs are from previous searches that were conducted. These here are stored as GUIDs, and where those correlate is here in FS cache data. Now, these don't have any file extensions, so I don't know immediately what they are, and all you have to do is open these up in a text editor and start to look. Now, there's one that's always in this folder, and I have no idea why. It's a massive list of changed password URLs. These are not sites that were visited from this device. And further down, it actually stores information about the password required characters, the minimum length requirements for all these sites, and I don't really know why Safari keeps that local to the device or why it keeps it in this particular folder. But all of these other ones, let's take a look at what is in here. So I can see from looking at the ASCII that this is an image, potentially with EXIF data. So I'm going to come over to Finder again so I can see these modification times. And I'm going to start giving these their proper extensions. Oops. Okay. So let's take a look at what we've got. We've got Stone Cold Steve Austin. Would love to know why that's in there. Here's one of the pictures of Amber Tamblyn that showed up in our Siri suggestions. There's the one of Amber Heard. Now remember, I didn't search for Amber Heard. I didn't even type Amber Heard. But this has ended up there, and it is in Cache.db. Here's a dog, probably from some other search. And so I can go through there, and all of these are going to correlate again to the GUIDs that are stored here. Now, I'm not entirely sure why, if the data, this I'm going to guess means that the data is not on the file system, so it's just storing it here in Cache.db as a blob, but these are on the file system. I don't know why. I don't know why some are written to the file system in that cache folder. Maybe it's because those were not completed searches, and so it's going to get rid of those faster than it does the other ones. I don't know. But now we know what these are, and we know how to correlate those to timestamps. The other place that we can go to pull information is from these response and request objects. Now, if you look up here, you'll see BP list. So we know this is a plist, and I can just save out this binary. I'm going to put it somewhere I can find it. And we'll just call it response object. Come back over here to Finder. I'm going to change it to its proper file extension. Oops. I did this earlier. Let's try that again. And now I can open this up in a plist viewer and start to see what's in here. So I can see exactly the URL where that image was pulled from. And more importantly, once again, I can see this is a timestamp. This is a core data date. I can convert this, and I will be able to see that this is in UTC, and it's going to spit out in Physical Analyzer exactly as it's stored in UTC, not in local time. So I will have to do that manually if I'm going to reference this creation time. And so that's really good stuff. So now we kind of know when things end up in Cache.db and then ultimately end up in your media tab in Physical Analyzer with timestamps. Now we know where those are actually stored in the file system, and we know that in many cases the user wasn't even searching for those things. The user was searching for something totally unrelated, but Safari, trying to be helpful and trying to provide a better search experience, went ahead and loaded those images in and kept them on the local device to make search better for the user and make life harder for the examiner. But now we know where to go to see what those are. So if we didn't know what the user had done, if we didn't know that the user had, searched for this full search phrase, although we could go into history.db and see exactly what they searched for and at what time and sort of divine it from there, we have these other artifacts that we pulled, which are Safari sessions. So we'll take a look at those. Now we're going to take a look at these session files that we pulled out of the parse.cd folder. And these are created when somebody uses Safari. And like I said before, if you see one that says .open, it's because there's an active Safari session. And when that session ends, then it will be marked as closed. As I pull this up in a text editor to see what's in it, it looks like madness. What is this? But don't be intimidated. Just start scrolling through it and seeing what you can see that you recognize and that does make sense. So one thing I saw was user agent strings, and this is my iPad and the operating system version of my iPad. So, okay, I understand what that is. And then I remember that this is here because it contained Amber Heard. Now, I know that this one, based on the modification time, is the one, I think, from when we were doing those searches for Amber Tamblyn, and it showed us Amber Heard. And so if I Control F and say who is, and now I'm seeing something, I'm seeing a pattern. A, M, B. And so you see in this Safari session, it is storing basically almost like a keylogger everything as I was typing it. Why is it doing that? Well, I can see right next to it, this is where it's going, and it's starting to pull images and information from websites in order to fill them in to that search box. So who is Amber Heard? I keep typing, who is Amber? Let me just type in Tam. I think what's interesting here is, if you'll recall, I misspelled Tamblyn, but it still completed the search for me correctly. It went ahead and corrected it and started pulling things from Wikipedia and other sites. So we can see from here that Safari is actively recording what we're searching for as we're typing it. It's actively going out on the web, and it is CDNing in images and information that it can add to that search box. And Another cool thing that I found in this file, let me see if I can get to it quickly. I think it had client in it. Yes. Here we go. All right, so let's check out this URL. So we have clients1.google.com complete search JSON. No labels, client iPhone, Safari. And then where we see Q is probably stands for query, and we see the first word in what I searched, Y. And if you keep going through here, these URLs will get generated for each letter practically that I type in the search box. Now what's going to happen if I go out here and I copy and paste this into Safari? It literally wrote a text file to my local device, and oh my god, are these things funny. Okay, I typed in Y, and Google is like, here is an array of things that this person might be searching for. Why were chainsaws invented? Why is the sky blue? Why is my poop green? Why is there a formula shortage? Why is Russia invading Ukraine? Why am I so tired? Then it gets a little darker, and just darker and darker from there. I love this. This is hysterical. We can actually kind of hack this URL a little bit. So if I type this in, I think it's a plus sign. Why do cats? And it's going to save out another response. Why do cats? Why do cats purr? Why do cats need? Why do cats make biscuits? Why do cats lick you? Why do cats have whiskers? This is really fun and amazing. I feel like somebody should turn a game out of this. But all that to say, Safari is a keylogger. It's in cahoots with Google to try to guess what you're going to search for, and it is not necessarily good at it, which is why you may end up with images in cache that are bananas, that are not in any way related to anything the user did, and all of that is stored here in these session files. Now, you may not see any session files even in a full file system extraction. So what's the point? Well, the point is that now you understand fully what is happening under the hood of Safari about why there may be images in cache that have nothing to do with user behavior, and you know that if you are going to use a cache image as evidence, that you need to adjust that creation date and you need to correlate it to some user activity. You need to correlate it to an actual search that was conducted. And so I'll give an example from a real case that I worked on, obviously giving no, identifiable information. So an examiner tried to use a picture, it was album artwork from The Clash, and the creation time was during time when this person was supposedly driving. It was a distracted driver case. And by doing this type of research and this type of testing, I could see that, number one, the time is not right. The search was actually conducted 5 hours earlier than this examiner said, because the examiner didn't adjust the creation timestamp. They just went by what Physical Analyzer told them, which, we've all done. These array responses from Google In some versions of iOS, those are stored next to around these blobs. So you will see these GUIDs and you'll see blobs, but you would also see those array responses. And what I determined was that 5 hours before this person was driving, they searched for, should I stay with some stock that they were invested in? But what Safari thought they were going to search for was, should I stay or should I go? And hence, a picture of the Clash showed up, and, you know, that person was not Googling the Clash while they were driving, which is what they were accused of doing. So this stuff may seem like overkill, but it's really important. Now, I think that there is a line at which we do have to say there are going to be types of images that Siri is simply not going to show you, and they're not going to end up in Cache.db. And so if there are cached images on an iOS system that are CSAM, that is not from this, clearly. But anything else, you know, pictures of guns, pictures of drugs, pictures of violence, pictures of people, just be very careful that you don't, one, take Physical Analyzer at its word about the timestamp, and two, that you make sure that this image ended up there as the result of an actual search that the user conducted and not because of a search suggestion. So I hope you enjoyed nerding out with me on Safari caching artifacts. I had a lot of fun with this. I love doing research like this. And if you have any questions, then feel free to reach out.